Every morning at exactly 6:15, Lisa Rodriguez would stand in front of her bathroom mirror and practice her smile. Not the genuine one that used to light up her face when she was 22 and believed the world held endless possibilities. No, this was different. This was the smile she'd perfected over 7 years of marriage, the one that said everything was fine when nothing was fine at all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her reflection stared back at her, tired brown eyes framed by dark circles that concealer could only do so much to hide. The woman looking back had learned to make herself small, to speak softly, to anticipate every mood shift and navigate every landmine that might set off the explosion she dreaded most. That woman had forgotten what it felt like to take up space in her own life. But mirrors, Lisa had learned, never lie. And today, something was different. The Arizona sun was already beating down mercilessly at 7 in the morning, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of Willow Creek Drive. Lisa stood at her kitchen window, watching the neighbors load their kids into minivans and SUVs, heading off to soccer practice and piano lessons and all the normal Saturday activities that felt like luxuries from another lifetime. Her own Saturday would be different. It always was. Derek Martinez had rules about Saturdays. The house had to be spotless before he woke up. His coffee had to be ready, black with exactly 1 sugar cube, not 2. His breakfast had to be on the table by 8:30, and if the eggs were even slightly overcooked, the entire day would spiral into something she preferred not to think about. Lisa had become an expert at reading the signs. The way Derek's jaw would tighten when he first opened his eyes. The particular silence that meant he was cataloging everything wrong with his life, which inevitably became everything wrong with her. The heavy footsteps that meant she had approximately 30 seconds to brace herself for whatever fresh hell was about to unfold. This morning, she heard those footsteps earlier than usual. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in yesterday's clothes, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles. His auto repair shop had been struggling for months, losing customers to the new chain garage that opened across town. Every lost customer became another reason why Lisa wasn't supportive enough, wasn't grateful enough, wasn't good enough. Coffee's not hot, he said, his voice carrying that edge she knew too well. Lisa turned from the window, her practiced smile already in place. I just made it fresh. Let me pour you a new cup. Fresh? Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. You call this fresh? What time did you even get up this morning? Been standing around daydreaming again while everything goes to hell? She poured the coffee carefully, her hands steady despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. 7 years of marriage had taught her that every response was potentially the wrong response. Defend herself, and she was being argumentative. Stay silent, and she was being disrespectful. Apologize, and she was admitting fault for something that wasn't her fault to begin with. I'm sorry, she said anyway, because it was often the path of least resistance. Here's your coffee. I'll start breakfast. Derek took the mug and immediately set it down harder than necessary. You know what? Forget it. I don't know why I bother. You can't even get coffee right, and I'm supposed to trust you with anything else? Lisa began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, moving with the efficiency of someone who had performed this dance countless times before. Eggs, butter, the good bacon Derek insisted on even though money was tight. Her hands moved automatically, while her mind retreated to that safe place she'd learned to find during moments like these. Look at you, Derek continued, settling into his chair at the kitchen table. Standing there like a ghost. You know what you are, Lisa? You're worthless. Absolutely worthless. I work my ass off trying to save a business that's going under, and I come home to a wife who can't even manage the simplest things. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire she couldn't put out. Worthless. It wasn't the first time he'd used it, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. Over the years, that word had become part of her internal vocabulary, a constant whisper in the back of her mind whenever she tried to do something for herself, whenever she dared to imagine a different life. She cracked the eggs into the pan, listening to them sizzle against the hot surface. The Hendersons called yesterday about their transmission, she said quietly, trying to redirect the conversation towards something safer. I wrote down their number by the phone. The Hendersons? Derek's voice sharpened. What did you tell them? Just that you'd call them back. They seemed really interested in having you look at their car. Seemed interested. Right. Derek pushed back from the table, standing up abruptly. You know what your problem is, Lisa? You don't understand business. You don't understand pressure. You just float through life expecting everything to work out while other people do the actual work. Lisa flipped the eggs carefully, keeping her voice level. I was just trying to help. Help? The word came out like an accusation. You want to help? Try not screwing up the simple things. Try not making me look like an idiot in front of potential customers. Try being a wife instead of whatever this is. He gestured at her dismissively, and Lisa felt herself shrink further into the space she'd carved out for survival. She plated his breakfast in silence, arranging everything exactly the way he liked it. The eggs over easy but not runny. 3 strips of bacon, crisp but not burned. 2 pieces of toast, lightly buttered. Derek sat back down and took a bite without acknowledging the effort. This is what I'm talking about, he said after a moment. You can't even cook eggs right. They're overdone. Lisa looked at the eggs. They weren't overdone. They were exactly the way he usually liked them. But pointing that out would only escalate things, and she was too tired for escalation. Too tired for the circular arguments. That always ended the same way, with her apologizing for existing and him storming out to spend the day with his buddies, complaining about his useless wife. I'll remember for next time, she said instead. Next time. Derek shook his head. There's always a next time with you, isn't there? Always an excuse, always a promise to do better. But you never actually do better, do you? You just keep being the same worthless disappointment you've always been. The word again. Worthless. Lisa had heard it so many times it had lost its sting, or so she told herself. But today, standing in her kitchen with the morning sun streaming through windows she'd cleaned yesterday, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the light caught the small potted plant Angela had given her last month, the one she'd been secretly nurturing on the windowsill. Maybe it was the sound of children laughing outside, reminding her of dreams she'd once had. Or maybe it was simply that after 7 years of being called worthless, she was finally starting to wonder what worth actually looked like. Derek finished his breakfast in silence, reading something on his phone while Lisa cleaned the kitchen around him. When he was done, he pushed his plate away without a word of thanks and headed toward the door. I'll be at Tony's working on his bike, he said. Don't wait up. And try not to burn the house down while I'm gone. The front door slammed behind him, and Lisa found herself alone in the sudden quiet. She stood at the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, and realized she was holding her breath. It was something she'd started doing without realizing it, this unconscious bracing for impact that had become as natural as breathing. She let the air out slowly and looked around the kitchen. It was spotless, as always. The counters gleamed, the floor was freshly mopped, everything in its designated place. This was the life she'd built, or rather, the life that had been built around her while she slowly disappeared into the background of her own existence. But today felt different. Today, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt like possibility. Lisa dried her hands and walked to the living room, where Derek's laptop sat closed on the coffee table. He'd forgotten it in his rush to escape the scene of his latest verbal assault. She stared at it for a long moment, knowing his password, knowing she could open it if she wanted to. Not to snoop, but to do something she'd been thinking about for weeks. Her phone buzzed with a text from Angela. Coffee later? I miss your face. Angela Thompson had been her best friend since college, back when Lisa still believed she could do anything. She was a teacher now at Pine Valley Elementary. Divorced and fiercely independent in a way that Lisa both admired and envied. Angela had never liked Derek, had never hidden her concern about the way he spoke to Lisa, the way he'd slowly isolated her from friends and family over the years. Lisa typed back, can't today. Maybe next week? But even as she sent the message, she found herself walking back to the kitchen, to the small notebook she kept hidden behind the flour canister. She'd been writing in it secretly for months, jotting down thoughts and observations and tiny acts of rebellion that no one would ever see. Today, she pulled it out and opened to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, "What does worthless actually mean?" It seemed like a simple question, but as she sat there with her pen poised over the paper, she realized she'd never really thought about it. Worthless meant without worth, without value. But who decided what had value? Who got to make that determination? Derek called her worthless, but Derek couldn't balance a checkbook without help. Derek couldn't remember his mother's birthday or make a meal that didn't come from a box. Derek couldn't have a conversation without turning it into an argument or maintain a friendship without eventually driving the person away with his constant negativity. Lisa, on the other hand, had managed their household finances for 7 years, turning Derek's irregular income into a functioning budget that kept them housed and fed. She remembered everyone's birthdays, maintained relationships with his family even when he couldn't be bothered, and had somehow kept their marriage from completely falling apart despite his best efforts to sabotage it. So who exactly was worthless in this equation? The thought was dangerous and thrilling and completely unlike anything Lisa had allowed herself to think in years. She wrote it down anyway, her handwriting growing stronger with each word. I am not worthless. I have been told I am worthless. So many times that I started to believe it. But believing something doesn't make it true. She paused, reading the words back to herself. They felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like a language she'd once spoken fluently but had forgotten. Over time. Outside, she could hear Mrs. Patterson working in her garden, humming something that sounded like an old hymn. Mrs. Patterson was 78, lived alone, and somehow managed to maintain the most beautiful yard on the block. She was also the closest thing Lisa had to a friend in the neighborhood, always ready with a smile and a kind word when their paths crossed at the mailbox. On impulse, Lisa closed her notebook and walked outside. The heat hit her immediately, but it felt good after the air-conditioned chill of the house. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her roses and waved. "Morning, honey," she called out. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Lisa walked over to the fence that separated their yards. "Your roses are gorgeous, Mrs. Patterson. I don't know how you do it." The older woman chuckled, wiping dirt from her hands on her gardening apron. "Oh, it's not magic, dear. Just patience and attention. These plants want to grow and bloom, you know. They just need someone to believe in them and give them what they need." Something in those words hit Lisa unexpectedly hard. Plants that wanted to grow and bloom, that just needed someone to believe in them. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes and blinked them away quickly. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Mrs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Patterson asked, her voice gentle with concern. Lisa forced her practiced smile. "I'm fine. Just allergies, I think." But Mrs. Patterson had lived too long and seen too much to be fooled by a fake smile. She studied Lisa's face for a moment, then set down her gardening shears and walked closer to the fence. "You know, dear, I've been meaning to tell you something. My daughter lives up in Phoenix now, and she's always talking about these online classes she takes. College courses, right from her computer. Says it's never too late to learn something new." Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. Online classes? Oh yes. She got her degree that way, working around her kids' schedules. Says there are all kinds of programs now, for people who want to better themselves but can't make it to a traditional campus. Mrs. Patterson's words hung in the air like seeds waiting to take root. Lisa had always been good at school, had dreamed of becoming a teacher herself before Derek convinced her that college was a waste of time and money. That was 7 years ago, when she still believed in dreams. "That sounds interesting," Lisa managed to say. "I could get you her number if you'd like. She loves talking about her studies, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind sharing some information." Lisa nodded before she could stop herself. "That would be nice. Thank you." Mrs. Patterson smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she understood more than she was letting on. "I'll get that for you. And Lisa? Remember what I said about the roses. Sometimes the most beautiful blooms come from the plants that look the most hopeless at first." Lisa walked back to her house with Mrs. Patterson's words echoing in her mind. Online classes. College courses. The possibility of learning something new, of becoming something more than what she was today. She sat back down at her kitchen table and opened her notebook again. Below her earlier declaration about not being worthless, she wrote, "What if I could go back to school?" The question felt huge and impossible and completely terrifying. Derek would never approve. He'd find a dozen reasons why it was a bad idea, why they couldn't afford it, why Lisa wasn't smart enough or disciplined enough to succeed. He'd make her feel foolish for even considering it. But Derek wasn't here right now. Lisa opened his laptop and typed in his password. The internet browser opened to his usual home page, and she navigated to a new tab. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she typed, "Pine Valley Community College online courses." The search results filled the screen, and Lisa felt her breath catch. There were dozens of programs, from basic certificates to full degree programs. Business administration, education, healthcare, technology. The website was clean and welcoming, with photos of smiling students of all ages and testimonials from people who had changed their lives through education. She clicked on the education program and read about becoming a certified teacher's aide, then moving on to elementary education. The program could be completed entirely online, with flexible scheduling designed for working adults. Financial aid was available. There was even a section for students returning to education after years away. Students like her. Lisa spent the next hour exploring the website, reading about admission requirements and course catalogs and career outcomes. For the first time in years, she felt something that might have been excitement building in her chest. This was possible. This was actually, tangibly possible. She was so absorbed in reading that she almost missed the sound of Derek's truck in the driveway. Her heart jumped, and she quickly closed the browser, shut the laptop, and slid her notebook back behind the flour canister. By the time Derek walked through the door, she was standing at the sink, washing dishes that were already clean. "What have you been doing all day?" he asked, suspicion already creeping into his voice. "Just cleaning," Lisa replied, not trusting herself to say more. Derek looked around the already spotless kitchen as if searching for evidence of some crime. "Right. Cleaning. The same thing you do every day while I'm out trying to save our asses." Lisa nodded and kept washing the same plate for the third time. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in 7 years, she had a secret that belonged entirely to her. A possibility that Derek knew nothing about. A tiny seed of hope that no amount of his cruelty could touch. Because today, Lisa Rodriguez had discovered something her husband would never understand. She had learned the difference between being called worthless and actually being worthless. And tomorrow, she was going to start proving just how valuable she really was. The afternoon stretched ahead of them, filled with the usual Saturday routines. And Derek's usual complaints. But Lisa moved through it all with something new humming quietly beneath her practiced compliance. It was small and fragile and completely hers. It was the beginning of everything. Sunday mornings had always been Lisa's favorite time of the week, back when she still allowed herself to have favorites. There was something about the way the desert light filtered through the bedroom curtains at dawn, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that made the world feel softer somehow. Even Derek seemed less volatile on Sunday mornings, usually sleeping off whatever he'd consumed at Tony's garage the night before. This particular Sunday, Lisa woke before her alarm and lay still for a moment, listening to Derek's heavy breathing beside her. Yesterday's discovery felt like a dream in the harsh light of morning reality. Had she really spent an hour researching college programs? Had she really written those dangerous words in her notebook about not being worthless? The memory felt both thrilling and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you could either step back to safety or learn to fly. She slipped out of bed carefully, her bare feet silent on the cold tile floor. The house was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning unit working overtime against the Arizona heat that started building before sunrise. In the kitchen, she made coffee and stood at the window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in the distance. Mrs. Patterson was already in her garden, tending to something near her back fence. The older woman moved with purpose despite her age, and Lisa found herself wondering what it would feel like to have that kind of certainty about your place in the world. To wake up knowing that your day belonged to you, that your choices were your own. Her phone buzzed with another text from Angela. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. Everything okay? I'm worried." Lisa stared at the message for a long time. Angela had been trying to reach out more frequently lately, but Lisa had gotten out of the habit of maintaining friendships. Derek had made it clear early in their marriage that her friends were a distraction, that a good wife focused on her husband and home rather than gossiping with people who didn't understand their relationship. But standing in her kitchen with the morning light streaming through clean windows, Lisa realized she missed Angela desperately. She missed having someone to talk to who knew her as more than just Derek's disappointing wife. She missed laughing about stupid things and sharing secrets and feeling like she mattered to someone. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed back, "Want to meet for coffee this morning? Desert Rose Diner?" The response came immediately, "Yes. Give me 30 minutes." Lisa felt a flutter of panic mixed with excitement. She hadn't made plans without Derek's permission in months. But Derek was unconscious upstairs and wouldn't wake up for hours, and the diner was only a 10-minute drive away. She could be back before he even knew she was gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter saying she'd gone to get groceries and would be back soon, then grabbed her purse and car keys. The morning air was already warm, but it felt like freedom as she backed out of the driveway. The Desert Rose Diner sat on the outskirts of Riverside, a throwback to the 1950s with red vinyl booths and chrome fixtures that had seen better decades. Lisa had always loved it here, back when she and Derek were first dating and he still pretended to care about the things that made her happy. Now, as she pushed through the glass door and heard the familiar jingle of bells, she felt like she was stepping back into a version of herself she'd almost forgotten existed. Angela was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her wild curly hair pulled back in a messy bun and her reading glasses perched on top of her head. She looked up when Lisa approached, and her face broke into a smile that was equal parts joy and concern. "There she is," Angela said, standing to pull Lisa into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "I was starting to think you disappeared completely." Lisa slid into the booth across from her friend, suddenly aware of how different she must look. Angela was wearing a flowing sundress in bright colors, her arms adorned with silver bracelets that caught the light when she moved. Lisa had on jeans and a plain white t-shirt, clothes chosen for their invisibility rather than their beauty. "I know I've been hard to reach," Lisa said, accepting the menu from their waitress even though she'd memorized it years ago. "Things have been complicated." Angela studied her face with the intensity of someone who'd known her for over a decade. Complicated how? And don't you dare tell me everything's fine. I can see it in your eyes. Lisa felt tears threaten and blinked them away quickly. She wasn't used to being seen anymore, really seen, and Angela's direct gaze was both comforting and overwhelming. Derek's business is struggling, she said, which was true but not the whole truth. Money's tight, and he's been stressed. And when Derek's stressed, he takes it out on you. It wasn't a question, and Lisa felt her carefully constructed defenses crumble a little. Angela had always been able to see through her pretenses, even back in college when Lisa thought she was good at hiding things. It's not that simple, Lisa said quietly. Isn't it? Angela leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Lisa, I've watched you disappear over the past few years. You used to be this bright, confident woman with opinions and dreams and a laugh that could fill a room. Now you apologize for existing and act like you're afraid of your own shadow. The words hit harder because they were true. Lisa stared down at her hands, noticing how she'd unconsciously positioned them to hide the thin wedding ring that had started feeling more like a shackle than a symbol of love. He's not a bad person, Lisa said, the words automatic after years of practice. He's just going through a rough time. For 7 years? Angela's voice sharpened. Lisa, rough times don't last 7 years. And they don't give anyone the right to treat someone they claim to love like garbage. The waitress returned, and they ordered coffee and breakfast neither of them was particularly hungry for. When they were alone again, Angela reached across the table and covered Lisa's hand with her own. I need you to listen to me, Angela said. Really listen. You are not responsible for Derek's feelings or his failures or his inability to handle stress like a grown adult. You are not his punching bag, emotional or otherwise. And you deserve so much better than whatever this has become. Lisa felt something crack open inside her chest, a dam she'd built to hold back years of suppressed feelings and swallowed words. I don't know how to be anything else anymore, she whispered. I don't even remember who I was before all this. I remember, Angela said fiercely. I remember the girl who was going to teach kindergarten and change the world one kid at a time. I remember the woman who could debate politics for hours and never back down from what she believed in. I remember someone who had dreams and plans and refused to settle for less than she deserved. That person feels like someone I used to know, Lisa admitted. Like a character in a book I read once. She's still in there, Angela insisted. Buried under years of being told she doesn't matter, but still there. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Their food arrived, and they ate in contemplative silence for a few minutes. Lisa found herself thinking about yesterday's discoveries, about the community college website and the education programs that had felt like messages from another universe. She thought about Mrs. Patterson's roses and her words about plants that wanted to grow but needed someone to believe in them. Can I tell you something? Lisa said finally. Something I haven't told anyone? Angela nodded, setting down her fork to give Lisa her full attention. Yesterday, I looked up college programs online. Education programs. The words felt strange in her mouth, like a foreign language she was learning to speak. I know it sounds crazy, but I started thinking about maybe going back to school. Angela's face lit up like Christmas morning. Lisa, that's not crazy at all. That's the smartest thing I've heard you say in years. What kind of programs? Teaching, Lisa said, the word gaining strength as she spoke it. Elementary education, maybe starting with a teacher's aide certification. I found this program at Pine Valley Community College that's completely online, flexible scheduling for working adults. That's perfect for you, Angela said, excitement building in her voice. You've always been amazing with kids, and you need something that's yours, something Derek can't control or criticize. The mention of Derek sent a chill through Lisa's excitement. He'd never agree to it. He thinks college is a waste of money, especially for women. He'd say I'm too old, too stupid, that I'd just fail anyway. Since when does Derek get to decide what you do with your life? Angela's voice was sharper now, tinged with the anger Lisa had never allowed herself to feel. You're 30 years old, not 13. You don't need his permission to better yourself. You don't understand, Lisa said, feeling the familiar weight of defending the indefensible. We're married. We make decisions together. No, you don't, Angela said bluntly. Derek makes decisions, and you go along with them. That's not a marriage, Lisa. That's something else entirely. They sat in silence for a moment, the truth hanging between them like smoke. Lisa knew Angela was right, had known it for years, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified her. I'm scared, Lisa admitted finally. I'm scared of what happens if I try to change things. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of making everything worse. What if you succeed? Angela asked quietly. What if you're amazing at it? What if you discover that you're capable of so much more than Derek has convinced you to believe? The possibility felt too large to contemplate, like trying to imagine infinity. But sitting there in the diner with her oldest friend, surrounded by the gentle clatter of dishes and the murmur of Sunday morning conversations, Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. There's something else, Angela said, reaching into her purse. I probably should have given this to you months ago, but I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. She pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Patricia Williams runs a non-profit downtown that helps women get back on their feet. Job training, educational support, counseling services. She's helped dozens of women rebuild their lives. Lisa picked up the card, running her thumb over the raised lettering. New Beginnings Women's Center, she read aloud. Pat's incredible, Angela continued. She went through her own difficult situation years ago and now dedicates her life to helping other women find their strength. I told her about you once, and she said if you ever wanted to talk, she'd make time. You told her about me? Lisa felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with something that might have been gratitude. I told her I had a friend who was struggling to remember how amazing she is, Angela clarified. Pat doesn't judge anyone, Lisa. She just helps people figure out their next steps. Lisa slipped the card into her purse, her heart racing. The morning had brought so many possibilities she felt dizzy trying to process them all. College programs, support services, friends who still believed in her potential even when she'd forgotten it herself. I should get back, Lisa said, glancing at her phone. It was almost 10, and Derek would be waking up soon. If he realizes I'm gone without telling him where I was going. What? Angela challenged. What happens then? Lisa didn't answer because she couldn't find words for the dread that filled her at the thought of Derek's anger. The accusations, the silent treatment, the way he could make her feel guilty for breathing wrong. But saying it out loud would make it real, and she wasn't ready for that level of honesty yet. Angela paid for breakfast despite Lisa's protests, walking her out to the parking lot where the desert sun was already intense enough to shimmer off the asphalt. Promise me something, Angela said as they reached Lisa's car. Promise me you'll think about what we talked about today. Really think about it. I promise, Lisa said, and meant it. And promise me you'll call Pat. Even if it's just to talk. You don't have to commit to anything, but you owe it to yourself to explore your options. Lisa nodded, though the idea of calling a stranger to discuss her failing marriage felt impossible. Still, she'd thought going back to school was impossible. Yesterday, and today it felt like something she might actually do. Angela pulled her into another long hug. I love you, you know that? The real you, not the version Derek has tried to create. Remember that when things get dark. Lisa drove home with Angela's words echoing in her mind and Patricia Williams' business card burning a hole in her purse. The house looked exactly the same as when she'd left it, but something inside her had shifted during the past 2 hours. She felt like she'd stepped outside a windowless room she hadn't realized she'd been trapped in, and now the walls seemed smaller than before. Derek was in the kitchen when she walked in, standing at the counter in boxer shorts and yesterday's t-shirt. His hair was sticking up at odd angles, and he had the rumpled, slightly hostile look of someone dealing with a hangover. Where the hell were you? He demanded before she'd even set down her purse. I woke up and you were gone. No note, nothing. I left a note, Lisa said, pointing to the piece of paper still sitting on the counter. I went to get groceries. Derek looked at the note like it was written in a foreign language. Groceries? Where are they then? Lisa's mind raced. She'd been so focused on meeting Angela that she'd completely forgotten her cover story. They didn't have what I needed. She said quickly. I'll go back later. Derek studied her face with the suspicious intensity of someone who'd made paranoia an art form. You're acting weird, he said finally. Different. What's going on? Nothing's going on, Lisa replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I just went to the store. Sorry I worried you. But Derek wasn't satisfied. He moved closer, invading her personal space in a way that had become his signature move over the years. You smell like coffee, he said. And pancakes. Since when? Do grocery stores smell like pancakes? Lisa felt her carefully constructed morning crumbling around her. There was a little cafe attached to the market, she improvised. I got coffee while I was there. Which market? Derek's voice was getting that edge that meant he was building toward something bigger. Because I drove past Patterson's and Miller's this morning, and neither of them has a cafe. The lie hung between them like a landmine waiting to explode. Lisa could feel Derek's anger building, could sense him cataloging this moment as evidence of her deception and disloyalty. In the old days, she would have immediately confessed everything, apologized profusely, and spent the rest of the day trying to make amends for her terrible crime of having coffee with a friend. But today, with Angela's words still fresh in her mind and Patricia Williams' business card hidden in her purse, Lisa made a choice that surprised them both. I had breakfast with Angela, she said quietly. At the Desert Rose Diner. I should have told you, but I knew you'd find a reason why I shouldn't go. Derek's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, and finally a cold fury that Lisa recognized as his most dangerous mood. So you lied to me? He said, his voice deadly calm. You snuck out of this house like some kind of teenager, met up with that feminist bitch who's always filling your head with poison, and then you came back here and lied to my face about where you'd been. I didn't lie, Lisa said, though her voice was shaking. I just didn't tell you everything. Same thing, Derek snapped. And don't you dare try to twist this around. You know exactly what you did wrong here. Lisa felt the familiar pattern beginning, the dance of accusation and defense that always ended with her apologizing for existing. But something about the morning had changed her, shifted some fundamental balance in her internal world. What did I do wrong, exactly, she heard herself ask. I had breakfast with my oldest friend. I was gone for 2 hours. I left a note saying I'd be back soon. Derek stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Are you seriously asking me that question? You lied to me, Lisa. You went behind my back to meet with someone who's been trying to break us up for years. Angela isn't trying to break us up, Lisa said, her voice growing stronger. She's my friend. She cares about me. She cares about turning you against me, Derek shot back. She's jealous because she's divorced and miserable, and she wants you to be just as miserable as she is. The words hit their intended target, and Lisa felt herself wavering. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe Angela was just projecting her own failed relationships onto Lisa's marriage. Maybe having breakfast with her had been a mistake. But then she remembered the way Angela had looked at her, with genuine concern and affection. She remembered feeling seen and valued and important for the first time in months. She remembered the possibility of going back to school, of becoming someone more than Derek's disappointing wife. Angela is happy, Lisa said finally. She has a job she loves, friends who respect her, a life that belongs to her. She's not miserable at all. Derek's expression shifted again, and Lisa realized she'd crossed some invisible line. So that's what this is about, he said. You're comparing our marriage to her pathetic single life and finding us lacking. Is that it? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Derek moved even closer, and Lisa fought the urge to step back. Let me guess what kind of poison she was feeding you today. Poor Lisa, trapped with her terrible husband. Poor Lisa, wasting her life taking care of someone who doesn't appreciate her. Poor Lisa, deserves so much better than what she has. Every word was accurate, but hearing Derek say them made them sound petty and self-indulgent. Lisa felt her resolve wavering, felt herself being pulled back into the familiar role of the apologetic wife who'd overstepped her bounds. She didn't say anything like that, Lisa protested weakly. Didn't she? Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because you came back here acting like a completely different person. Lying to my face, questioning my reasonable concerns about your behavior, defending someone who's never liked me. So either Angela filled your head with a bunch of bullshit, or you've been thinking things you haven't been sharing with me. Lisa realized she was trapped between two equally dangerous admissions. Either she'd been influenced by Angela, which would confirm Derek's suspicions about outside interference, or she'd been having independent thoughts about their relationship, which was perhaps even worse in his eyes. I just wanted to see my friend, she said finally. I miss having people to talk to. You have me to talk to, Derek said. I'm your husband. I'm supposed to be enough for you. But he wasn't enough, and they both knew it. Derek was a constant source of criticism and complaint, not conversation. He talked at her, not with her, and only when he needed something or had grievances to air. It's different, Lisa said carefully. Having a friend is different from having a husband. Different how? Derek demanded. What can you talk to her about that you can't talk to me about? Everything, Lisa thought but didn't say. Angela asked about her dreams and opinions and feelings. Derek asked if his coffee was ready and why the house wasn't cleaner and what was wrong with her now. I don't know, she said instead. It just is. Derek studied her for a long moment, and Lisa could practically see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating how far to push this, how much punishment was appropriate for her transgression, how to frame this as evidence of her fundamental character flaws. You know what your problem is, he said finally. You don't appreciate what you have. You've got a husband who works his ass off to provide for you, a house, security, and instead of being grateful, you're running around complaining to anyone who'll listen about how hard your life is. I wasn't complaining, Lisa said, though she realized that wasn't entirely true. She had complained, or at least acknowledged that things weren't perfect. Right, Derek said sarcastically. I'm sure it was all sunshine and rainbows. I'm sure you told Angela how happy you are, how much you love being married to me, how grateful you are for everything I do for you. Lisa said nothing because they both knew she hadn't said any of those things. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and growing resentment. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Derek continued. You can't even deny it. You went out there and badmouthed me to your friend, and now you can't even pretend otherwise. I didn't badmouth you, Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what did you talk about? Derek challenged. If you weren't complaining about me, what was so important that you had to sneak out of here to discuss it? Lisa thought about the college programs, about Patricia Williams' business card, about Angela's conviction that she deserved better than what she had. All of it felt too dangerous to share, too fragile to expose to Derek's inevitable ridicule and opposition. Just stuff, she said lamely. General catching up. Derek laughed again, and the sound made Lisa's skin crawl. General catching up. Right. For 2 hours. About stuff. He turned away from her then, shaking his head in disgust. You know what, Lisa? I'm done with this conversation. You want to play games and lie to me and act like I'm the bad guy? Fine. But don't expect me to pretend everything's normal when you're clearly not happy being here. He started to walk away, then turned back with one final shot. And next time you want to have breakfast with your divorced friend, maybe ask yourself why you need someone else's permission to feel good about your own life. Might tell you something about yourself you don't want to face. Derek disappeared upstairs, leaving Lisa standing alone in the kitchen with the weight of his words pressing down on her like a physical force. The morning's hope and possibility felt distant now, overwhelmed by the familiar guilt and confusion that always followed Derek's verbal assaults. But deep in her purse, Patricia Williams' business card waited like a secret promise. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Angela's voice whispered that she deserved better than this, that she was capable of more than Derek would ever allow her to believe. For the first time in 7 years, Lisa wasn't sure which voice she was going to listen to. But she was finally starting to understand that she had a choice in the matter. And that realization changed everything. Monday arrived with the weight of unfinished conversations and the electric tension that had filled the house since Derek's confrontation the day before. He'd spent Sunday evening at Tony's garage, returning home after midnight and sleeping on the couch without explanation. Lisa had lain awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling and replaying every word from her breakfast with Angela. The business card sat hidden in her jewelry box, tucked behind a pair of earrings she never wore anymore. 3 times during the sleepless night, she'd gotten up to look at it, reading Patricia Williams' name and the words, New Beginnings Women's Center, until they were burned into her memory. Derek left for work without speaking to her, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Lisa stood at the kitchen sink, watching his truck disappear down the street, and realized she felt more relief than sadness at his departure. When had that happened? When had her husband's absence become preferable to his presence? The house felt different without Derek's hostile energy filling every corner. Lighter somehow, like she could breathe more deeply without worrying about disturbing the carefully maintained peace. Lisa made herself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at Derek's closed laptop and thinking about all the things she'd discovered 2 days ago. Pine Valley Community College was still there, still offering online programs designed for working adults who wanted to change their lives. The education program was still accepting applications for the fall semester. The financial aid information was still available, outlining grants and scholarships that could make the impossible suddenly possible. Lisa opened the laptop and found herself navigating back to the college website before she'd consciously decided to do so. This time, she read everything more carefully, taking notes on a piece of paper she could easily hide if Derek came home unexpectedly. Application deadlines, prerequisite courses, estimated costs, and timeline for completion. The elementary education program could be finished in 3 years if she took 2 classes per semester. She could start with just 1 class, testing the waters before committing to more. The first course she'd need was Introduction to Educational Psychology, scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. 6 weeks felt both impossibly far away and terrifyingly soon. Lisa found herself clicking through to the application portal, creating an account with an email address Derek didn't know about. The application was surprisingly straightforward, asking for basic information, educational background, and a brief essay about her goals. She didn't submit it, but she filled it out, watching her words appear on the screen like evidence of a person she'd forgotten existed. I want to work with children because I believe education is the foundation of hope, she wrote. I want to help young people discover their potential and build confidence in their abilities. Teaching has always been my dream, and I'm ready to pursue it with dedication and passion. The words felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like a language she'd once spoken fluently but hadn't used in years. She saved the application as a draft and closed the laptop, her heart racing with the audacity of what she'd just done. Mrs. Patterson was in her yard again, this time planting something new near her front porch. Lisa watched her through the window, admiring the older woman's purposeful movements and the care she took with each small plant. On impulse, Lisa walked outside, drawn by the need for human connection that didn't involve criticism or conflict. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," she called out, approaching the fence between their properties. The older woman looked up with a smile, wiping soil from her hands on her gardening apron. "Well, hello there, dear. Beautiful morning, isn't it? I'm putting in some autumn sage. Should bloom well into November if we're lucky." Lisa watched Mrs. Patterson's gentle handling of the small plants, the way she created perfect spaces for each one and watered them with careful attention. "You make it look so easy." "Oh, it's not easy at all," Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Lots of trial and error over the years. Some plants thrive, some struggle, and some just aren't meant for this particular soil. The trick is figuring out what each one needs and having the patience to let them find their way. What if you plant something and it doesn't grow the way you expected?" Mrs. Patterson paused in her work, sensing something deeper in the question. "Well, that depends. Sometimes the plant just needs more time or different conditions or better support. Sometimes you realize you planted it in the wrong spot and need to transplant it somewhere it can flourish. And if someone tells you it's a waste of time, that you should stick with what you already have?" The older woman set down her trowel and gave Lisa her full attention. "Honey, I've been gardening for 50 years, and I've learned that the people who tell you not to try new things are usually the ones who are afraid of what might happen if you succeed." The words hit Lisa like a gentle slap, clarifying something she'd been struggling to understand. Derek's opposition to her dreams wasn't really about practicality or finances. It was about fear. Fear that she might discover she was capable of more than he'd convinced her to believe. Fear that she might outgrow the small space he'd created for her in their marriage. "Mrs. Patterson," Lisa said carefully, "do you still have your daughter's phone number? The one who took those online classes?" The older woman's face brightened. "Of course, dear. Let me get that for you right now." She disappeared into her house and returned with a slip of paper. "Her name's Rebecca, and she's wonderful about sharing information. Don't be surprised if she talks your ear off about her studies. She's very passionate about education." Lisa took the paper, feeling like she was accepting something much more significant than a phone number. "Thank you. This means more than you know." "We all need encouragement sometimes," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "And some of us need permission to want more than what we have. Consider this your permission, if you need it." Lisa walked back to her house with Rebecca's number clutched in her hand and Mrs. Patterson's words echoing in her mind. Permission to want more. When had she started needing permission for her own dreams? Inside, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at the phone number for a long time before finally picking up her phone and dialing. The woman who answered had a warm, enthusiastic voice that immediately put Lisa at ease. "You're Mrs. Patterson's neighbor? Oh, she's mentioned you. I'm so glad you called. Are you thinking about going back to school?" Lisa found herself explaining her situation, carefully editing out the parts about Derek's opposition and focusing on her interest in education. Rebecca was everything Mrs. Patterson had promised, generous with information and encouragement, sharing details about online learning that made it feel less daunting and more achievable. "The thing about online classes," Rebecca explained, "is that they work around your life instead of forcing your life to work around them. I studied while my kids were asleep, during lunch breaks, even in the car while waiting for soccer practice to end. It's completely doable if you're motivated." "What about the cost?" Lisa asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. "That's the beauty of community college. It's so much more affordable than a 4-year university, and there are tons of grants available for students returning to education. I paid for most of my degree with financial aid." They talked for nearly an hour, and by the time Lisa hung up, she felt like someone had opened a window in a room she hadn't realized was suffocating her. Rebecca had given her practical advice about study schedules, technology requirements, and navigating the enrollment process. More importantly, she'd given her hope that this wasn't just a fantasy but a real possibility. Lisa spent the rest of the morning researching financial aid requirements and filling out preliminary forms. She discovered that as a married woman with no income, she qualified for significant grant assistance that would cover most of her tuition costs. The revelation was both exciting and sobering, a reminder of how dependent she'd become on Derek for everything financial. By afternoon, she'd completed her college application and submitted it along with her high school transcripts and the required essay. The confirmation email arrived within minutes, informing her that she'd receive a response within 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find out if she'd been accepted, 2 weeks to figure out how to tell Derek, 2 weeks to decide if she was brave enough to follow through. The front door slammed at 5:30, Derek signaled that he was home and expecting his usual routine of dinner, complaints, and sullen silence. Lisa quickly closed the laptop and started preparing his meal, moving through the familiar choreography of appeasement while her mind raced with everything she'd accomplished during the day. Derek appeared in the kitchen looking disheveled and angry, his work clothes stained with grease and his expression darker than usual. "Truck broke down again," he announced without preamble. "Had to get it towed to Jackson's shop, and they're telling me it's going to cost $800 to fix." Lisa felt her stomach drop. $800 was money they didn't have, money that would mean deeper debt and more stress. And more reasons for Derek to take his frustrations out on her. "What's wrong with it?" she asked, setting his plate on the table with hands that had started shaking slightly. "Does it matter?" Derek snapped. "It's broken, it's expensive, and we're screwed. Again." He sat down heavily and started eating without acknowledging the effort she'd put into preparing his meal. Lisa stood at the counter, watching him and trying to calculate how this new financial crisis would affect everything. Would Derek expect her to get a job to help with expenses? Would he become even more controlling about money? Would this make him more or less likely to oppose her educational plans? "I might be able to find some work," she offered tentatively. "Maybe part-time somewhere, just to help out." Derek looked up at her with an expression that mixed surprise with suspicion. "Work? Doing what? You don't have any skills that anyone would pay for." The word stung, but Lisa forced herself to push past the automatic hurt. "I could learn something new. There are programs that help people develop job skills." "Programs," Derek repeated mockingly. "Right. More of your fantasy. Solutions to real-world problems. What we need is actual money, not you playing pretend student somewhere." Lisa felt anger flare in her chest, hot and unfamiliar. "It's not pretend. People change careers all the time. They go back to school and learn new things and build better lives for themselves." Derek set down his fork and stared at her. "Better lives. There it is again. What exactly is so terrible about the life you have now? You've got a house, food on the table, a husband who works his ass off to take care of you. What more do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. And Lisa realized it was the first time Derek had ever actually asked her what she wanted. Not what she should want, or what she was supposed to be grateful for, but what she actually desired for herself. "I want to matter," she said quietly. "I want to do something meaningful with my life. I want to feel useful and valuable and like I'm contributing something positive to the world." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You matter here. You take care of this house, you take care of me. That's not meaningful enough for you?" "It could be," Lisa said carefully, "if it felt like a choice instead of an obligation. If it felt like partnership instead of servitude." The words were out before she could stop them, and she saw Derek's face change from mockery to genuine anger. She'd crossed a line, spoken a truth that challenged the entire foundation of their relationship. "Servitude?" Derek's voice was dangerously quiet. "Is that what you think this is? You think I'm some kind of master and you're my slave?" Lisa backpedaled quickly, recognizing the signs of an escalating confrontation. "That's not what I meant. I just meant that sometimes it would be nice to feel like we're working together toward common goals instead of me always trying to anticipate what you need." "What I need," Derek said, standing up abruptly, "is a wife who appreciates what she has instead of constantly looking for reasons to be unhappy. What I need is someone who supports me instead of criticizing everything I do. What I need is a partner, not a whining child who thinks the grass is greener somewhere else." "I'm not whining," Lisa protested. "I'm trying to tell you how I feel." "How you feel," Derek repeated. "Everything's always about how you feel." "What about how I feel, Lisa? What about the pressure I'm under trying to keep this family afloat while you sit around daydreaming about some perfect life that doesn't exist?" Lisa felt the familiar pattern beginning, the way Derek could turn any conversation about her needs into evidence of her selfishness. But something had changed since her morning discoveries, some fundamental shift in her understanding of what was normal and what was acceptable. "Your feelings matter too," she said. "But that doesn't mean mine don't matter at all." Derek stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "Since when do you have feelings about anything other than what I've supposedly done wrong?" The question revealed so much about how Derek saw her, how he'd reduced her to nothing more than a critic of his behavior rather than a whole person with her own dreams and disappointments. Lisa felt something crystallize inside her, a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. "I've always had feelings," she said. "I just stopped sharing them because every time I did, you found a way to make them about you." Derek's anger shifted into something colder, more calculating. "So this is my fault?" "Of course it is. Poor Lisa, married to the terrible husband who doesn't understand her delicate feelings." Poor Lisa, trapped in a life she never asked for. With a man who obviously doesn't deserve her. I never said any of that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. You think you're better than this, better than me. You think you deserve some fairy tale life where everything's perfect and everyone appreciates your specialness. Lisa felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. I don't think I'm better than you. I just think we could both be happier if we supported each other's growth instead of tearing each other down. Growth, Derek scoffed. There's that word again. What exactly do you think you need to grow into, Lisa? What's the end goal of all this self-improvement you're so obsessed with? The question forced Lisa to articulate something she'd been feeling but hadn't fully understood. I want to be proud of myself, she said finally. I want to accomplish something meaningful. I want to feel like I'm using my potential instead of wasting it. And you can't do that here? Being my wife isn't meaningful enough? Lisa looked around the kitchen, with its spotless counters and perfectly organized cabinets, evidence of years spent maintaining a space that belonged to someone else. It could be part of a meaningful life, she said carefully. But I don't think it should be the only part. Derek turned away from her, walking to the window and staring out at the street. When he spoke again, his voice was flat and emotionless. You know what this is really about? You're bored. You're bored and restless and looking for excitement, and instead of dealing with that like an adult, you're blaming me for not being enough to keep you entertained. It's not about entertainment, Lisa said. It's about purpose. Purpose, Derek repeated. Right. And where exactly do you plan to find this purpose? In some classroom full of kids half your age? In some job that pays minimum wage and expects you to smile all day? In some fantasy career that doesn't actually exist? In the real world? Lisa felt her resolve wavering under the weight of Derek's skepticism. Maybe he was right. Maybe her dreams were unrealistic, childish fantasies that had no place in adult life. Maybe she should be grateful for what she had instead of constantly wanting more. But then she thought about Rebecca's enthusiasm, about Mrs. Patterson's quiet wisdom, about Angela's fierce belief in her potential. She thought about the college application sitting in some admissions office, waiting to be reviewed by people who might see possibility where Derek saw only foolishness. I don't know where I'll find it, she admitted. But I know I won't find it by giving up before I even try. Derek turned back to her, his expression unreadable. And if you try and fail? What then? Do we just pretend this whole embarrassing episode never happened? If I fail, at least I'll know I tried, Lisa said. At least I'll know I didn't spend my whole life wondering what might have been possible. They stared at each other across the kitchen, two people who'd been married for 7 years but felt like strangers. Lisa could see Derek calculating. His response, trying to find the words that would bring her back into line, that would restore the comfortable dynamic where she wanted nothing more than his approval. You're making a mistake, he said finally. You're throwing away something real for something that might not even exist. And when it all falls apart, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. The threat was implicit but clear. If she pursued her dreams and failed, Derek wouldn't be there to cushion the fall. If she stepped outside the narrow boundaries of their marriage, she'd be on her own. For the first time in 7 years, that possibility didn't terrify her as much as it probably should have. I understand, Lisa said quietly. I know this is scary for both of us. Derek snorted. I'm not scared. I'm disappointed. I thought I married someone who was happy with a simple life, not someone who was always going to be looking for something bigger and better. People change, Lisa said. People grow. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. People who are never satisfied change, Derek corrected. People who appreciate what they have tend to stay the same. The conversation was going in circles, and Lisa could feel Derek's anger building toward something more dangerous. She'd pushed further than usual, said things that couldn't be unsaid, and now they were both standing in territory neither of them knew how to navigate. I'm going to watch TV, Derek announced, effectively ending the discussion. Try not to burn the house down while you're planning your big escape from reality. He left her standing in the kitchen with dirty dishes and the weight of everything unspoken between them. Lisa cleaned up mechanically, her mind racing with the implications of their confrontation. She'd revealed more than she'd intended, shown Derek glimpses of thoughts and dreams she'd tried to keep hidden. But she'd also stood her ground in ways that felt both terrifying and liberating. She hadn't apologized for wanting more. She hadn't backed down when he tried to make her feel selfish for having ambitions. She hadn't let him reduce her dreams to mere boredom or dissatisfaction. That night, Lisa lay in bed listening to Derek's heavy breathing and thinking about everything that had changed in just a few days. 3 days ago, she'd been a woman who practiced fake smiles in the mirror and accepted worthlessness as her natural state. Tonight, she was someone who'd applied to college, researched career options, and defended her right to want more from life. The transformation felt fragile, like something that could be shattered by the wrong word or gesture. But it also felt irreversible, like she'd crossed a bridge that no longer existed behind her. In her jewelry box, Patricia Williams' business card waited like a lifeline she wasn't sure she was ready to grab. But knowing it was there, knowing that other women had made similar journeys and survived, gave her strength she hadn't known she possessed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to retreat or advance. But tonight, for the first time in years, Lisa Rodriguez fell asleep planning for a future that belonged entirely to her. The dreams that came were filled with classrooms and possibilities, with children's laughter and the satisfaction of work that mattered. They were dreams that Derek couldn't touch, couldn't criticize, couldn't diminish. They were hers alone. And that made all the difference. The acceptance letter arrived on a Thursday morning while Derek was at work and Lisa was scrubbing the bathroom floor, a task she'd taken to doing when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her rational thoughts. The email notification chimed from her phone, and she almost ignored it, assuming it was another promotional message or automated reminder about something she'd forgotten. But something made her stop, sit back on her heels, and check the message. The subject line made her heart skip several beats. Congratulations. Pine Valley Community College admission decision. Lisa stared at the words for a full minute, afraid to open the email and discover it was actually a rejection wrapped in polite language. Her hands shook as she tapped the message, and when the first line appeared on her screen, she had to read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Dear Lisa Rodriguez, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the elementary education program at Pine Valley Community College. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the bathroom tiles. Lisa sat there among her cleaning supplies, surrounded by the smell of bleach and the reality of her small, controlled world, while her acceptance letter glowed on the screen like a doorway to somewhere else entirely. She'd been accepted. Someone had read her application, her essay about wanting to help children discover their potential, and decided she was worth taking a chance on. After years of being told she was worthless, lacking in skills, too old to start over, a complete stranger had looked at her credentials and said yes. Lisa picked up her phone and read the email again, this time absorbing the details. Classes would begin in 3 weeks. She'd been assigned an academic advisor. There were forms to complete, orientations to attend, textbooks to purchase. The bureaucratic language of new beginnings, the administrative poetry of second chances. The bathroom floor remained half-scrubbed, but Lisa couldn't bring herself to care. She walked to the kitchen and sat at the table, staring at her phone and trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't a daydream or a what-if scenario. This was real, official, happening whether Derek approved or not. The thought of Derek brought a chill to her euphoria. He still didn't know she'd applied, still believed. Her talk of education was just frustrated complaining with no actual substance behind it. In 3 weeks, when classes started, she'd have to be somewhere he didn't expect her to be, doing something he'd explicitly told her was a waste of time. Lisa walked to the window and watched Mrs. Patterson working in her garden, methodically staking tomato plants that were already heavy with fruit. The older woman moved with the patience of someone who understood that good things took time to develop, that you couldn't rush growth but you could provide the right conditions for it to flourish. On impulse, Lisa walked outside and approached the fence between their properties. Mrs. Patterson? Could I talk to you for a minute? The older woman looked up with her usual warm smile, then seemed to notice something different in Lisa's expression. Of course, dear. You look like you've had some news. I got accepted, Lisa blurted out, the words tumbling over themselves in their eagerness to be spoken aloud. To college. The education program we talked about. Classes start in 3 weeks. Mrs. Patterson's face lit up like sunrise over the desert. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you for taking that step. How are you feeling? Terrified, Lisa admitted. Excited. Confused. Like I might throw up from nerves. Is that normal? Mrs. Patterson laughed, a sound full of understanding and shared experience. Completely normal. I felt the same way when I went back to work after raising my children. The fear means it matters to you. What if I'm making a terrible mistake? Lisa asked, voicing the doubt that had been growing alongside her excitement. What if I'm not smart enough, or too old, or just completely delusional about what I can accomplish? What if you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Mrs. Patterson countered gently. What if this is the beginning of discovering capabilities you never knew you had? They talked for nearly an hour, Mrs. Patterson sharing stories about her own late-in-life career changes and the unexpected joys of learning new skills. She talked about the satisfaction of growth, the pride that came from challenging yourself, the way accomplishment could change how you saw yourself in the world. The most important thing to remember, Mrs. Patterson said as their conversation wound down, is that you're not doing this to prove anything to anyone else. You're doing it for yourself, because you deserve the chance to see what you're capable of. Lisa walked back to her house with those words echoing in her mind. You deserve the chance to see what you're capable of. When had she stopped believing that about herself? When had Derek's voice become louder than her own internal wisdom? The rest of the day passed in a strange dreamlike state. Lisa completed her usual household tasks while her mind raced through practical considerations. She'd need a computer for online assignments, though Derek's laptop could probably work initially. She'd need textbooks, which the financial aid would cover. She'd need study time, which meant restructuring her schedule around Derek's expectations and demands. Most urgently, she'd need to tell Derek, and that conversation felt more daunting than any exam she might face in her classes. Derek came home that evening in a particularly foul mood, having spent the day dealing with the truck repairs and discovering that the estimate had grown from $800 to $1,200. He slammed through the front door like a storm system, filling the house with his frustration and anger. Kitchen faucets dripping again, he announced without preamble, dropping onto the couch and reaching for the remote. Add it to the list of things we can't afford to fix. Lisa brought him a beer and settled into the armchair across from him, her acceptance letter feeling like it was burning a hole in her pocket. She'd printed a copy, wanting something tangible to hold while she navigated what was sure to be a difficult conversation. Derek, she began carefully, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the television with the expression of someone expecting more bad news. What now? Lisa took a deep breath and pulled out the letter. I applied to Pine Valley Community College 3 weeks ago. Today I got my acceptance letter. Derek stared at her for a long moment, the remote frozen in his hand. You what? I applied for the elementary education program. It's completely online, so it won't interfere with anything here. And I qualified for financial aid, so it won't cost us anything. Derek's expression cycled through surprise, disbelief, and settling finally on cold anger. You applied to college. Without discussing it with me. Without asking my opinion or considering how it might affect our marriage. I knew you'd say no, Lisa admitted. I knew you'd find reasons why it was a bad idea, and I didn't want to give up the opportunity before I even tried. So you went behind my back. Again. Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. First the secret breakfast with Angela, now secret college applications. What else are you planning without bothering to include your husband? It's not like that, Lisa protested. I was going to tell you once I knew if I'd been accepted. I didn't want to create conflict over something that might not even happen. Conflict, Derek repeated mockingly. You mean you didn't want me to point out all the obvious problems with this ridiculous plan? What problems? Lisa asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The classes are online, so I'll still be here for everything you need. The cost is covered by grants. I'll be learning skills that could help me contribute financially to our household. Derek laughed, but the sound was harsh and humorless. Contributing financially. Right. You think some community college degree is going to turn you into a career woman? You think elementary schools are just waiting to hire 30-year-old women with no experience and a piece of paper from the local community college? His words hit their intended target, and Lisa felt her confidence waver. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was being naive about job prospects and realistic expectations. Maybe this was just an expensive way to delay accepting the limitations of her actual life. But then she thought about Rebecca's enthusiasm, about Mrs. Patterson's quiet encouragement, about the acceptance letter that someone had bothered to send because they believed she was worth the investment. I won't know what's possible unless I try, Lisa said. And even if it doesn't lead to a career immediately, learning something new has value in itself. Value, Derek scoffed. Everything has to have value with you, doesn't it? What about the value of being content with what you have? What about the value of being a supportive wife instead of chasing fantasies? Why can't I be both? Lisa asked. Why can't I be a supportive wife and also someone who's growing and learning? Because growing and learning takes time and energy and focus, Derek shot back. Time and energy and focus that should be directed toward this marriage, this household, this life we've built together. The life we've built, Lisa repeated slowly. You mean the life where I clean your house, cook your meals, and listen to you tell me how worthless I am? That's what you want me to focus all my energy on? Derek's face flushed with anger. I never said you were worthless. The lie hung between them like smoke, and Lisa felt something snap inside her chest. You said it on Saturday. You've said it dozens of times over the years. You told me I was worthless trash just last week when I forgot to record that TV show you wanted to watch. I was frustrated, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. People say things they don't mean when they're under pressure. Do they? Lisa stood up, facing him directly for the first time in their conversation. Because you seem to say it a lot when you're frustrated. And you seem to be frustrated a lot lately. Derek stared at her, clearly caught off guard by her directness. So this is my fault. Of course. Poor Lisa, driven to secret college applications by her terrible husband's occasional bad moods. This isn't about blame, Lisa said. This is about me deciding I want more from my life than just managing your moods and maintaining your household. More, Derek said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone she knew too well. Always more with you. Nothing's ever enough. Is it? I work myself to death trying to provide for you, and all you can think about is what else you want. I want to feel useful, Lisa said. I want to feel like I'm contributing something meaningful to the world. I want to wake up excited about my day instead of dreading what kind of mood you'll be in. The words came out before she could stop them, and she saw Derek's expression shift into something colder and more calculating than simple anger. So that's what this is really about, he said slowly. You're not happy. You're not satisfied with being my wife. You want something bigger and more exciting than this boring little life with your boring husband. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Derek moved closer, invading her personal space in the way he'd perfected over the years. You think you're too good for this. You think you deserve some glamorous career and a different kind of life. I think I deserve the chance to find out what I'm capable of, Lisa replied, holding her ground despite the familiar intimidation tactics. I think everyone deserves that chance. And if I say no? Derek asked. If I tell you that as your husband, I don't support this decision and I expect you to withdraw your application? The question hung in the air like a test, and Lisa realized they'd reached some kind of crossroads in their marriage. Derek was asking her to choose between his approval and her own growth, between his comfort and her potential. Then I guess we'll find out whether this marriage is a partnership or a dictatorship, Lisa said quietly. Derek's eyes widened in genuine shock. In 7 years of marriage, Lisa had never challenged his authority so directly, never forced him to articulate the power dynamics that had governed their relationship. A dictatorship, he repeated slowly. That's what you think this is? I think you make all the decisions and I go along with them, Lisa said. I think you decide what's reasonable and what's foolish, what's worth pursuing and what's a waste of time. I think my opinions and desires matter only when they align with yours. Derek was quiet for a long moment, and Lisa could see him processing this new version of his wife, this person who spoke her mind and refused to be dismissed. You're different, he said finally. Ever since that breakfast with Angela, you've been different. More argumentative. Less willing to compromise. More willing to advocate for myself, Lisa corrected. Less willing to apologize for existing. Existing? Derek's voice rose. Jesus, Lisa, you make it sound like I've been holding you prisoner. You have a home, financial security, a husband who cares about you. How is that not existing? Because existing isn't the same as living, Lisa said. Existing is going through the motions. Living is having purpose and growth and the freedom to make choices about your own life. Derek turned away from her, walking to the kitchen and back, his frustration evident in every movement. So what happens now? You start your classes and become some kind of different person? You decide that this life isn't good enough anymore and start looking for an exit strategy? The fear in his voice was more revealing than his anger had been. Beneath all the bluster and control, Derek was terrified of losing her, terrified. That education would give her the confidence and skills to imagine a life without him. I'm not looking for an exit strategy, Lisa said, though even as she spoke the words, she wondered if they were entirely true. I'm looking for a way to feel fulfilled within the life I have. And if you can't? If you discover that feeling fulfilled requires leaving this marriage? Lisa met his gaze directly. Then I guess we'll deal with that when we come to it. But right now, I'm asking you to support me in trying something that's important to me. I'm asking you to believe that I'm capable of more than cooking and cleaning. Derek was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the street where their neighbors were living their ordinary lives. When he spoke again, his voice was tired rather than angry. I don't understand why what we have isn't enough, he said. I don't understand why you need something else to feel complete. Because I'm not just your wife, Lisa said gently. I'm also a whole person with my own dreams and capabilities. Being married to you is part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am. Derek looked at her then with an expression she couldn't quite read. And what if I can't live with that? What if I need a wife who's satisfied with being just my wife? The question felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss she wasn't sure either of them was prepared to face. Then maybe we need to talk about whether we want the same things from this marriage, Lisa said quietly. The words hung between them like a bridge neither of them was ready to cross. Derek sat down heavily on the couch, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. I don't know how to be married to someone who's always looking for more, he admitted. I don't know how to compete with some fantasy life you've built in your head. You're not competing with anything, Lisa said, sitting down across from him. You're married to someone who's finally ready to grow. That doesn't have to be threatening. Doesn't it? Derek looked at her with genuine confusion. What happens when you realize you're smarter than me? What happens when you start making friends in your classes and comparing notes about your husbands? What happens when you discover there's a whole world out there that doesn't include me? The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Lisa's chest. For the first time in years, she could see past Derek's anger and control to the frightened man underneath, the person who'd built walls around their marriage because he was terrified of not being enough. Derek, she said softly, I'm not trying to find a world that doesn't include you. I'm trying to find a version of myself that I can be proud of. And I'd like to share that with you, if you'll let me. Derek studied her face for a long moment, and Lisa could see him struggling with concepts that challenged everything he'd believed about marriage and partnership. What if you fail? He asked finally. What if you start these classes and discover you're not as smart as you think you are? What if you waste all this time and energy on something that goes nowhere? Then I'll have learned something valuable about myself and my limits, Lisa said. And I'll figure out what to try next. What to try next, Derek repeated. So this is just the beginning. Even if this works out, you'll always be looking for the next challenge, the next thing to prove. Lisa realized that Derek saw her growth as an endless series of disruptions rather than a natural part of being human. He wanted her to reach some plateau of self-improvement and stay there, satisfied and stable and predictable. People don't stop growing just because they reach a certain age or achieve a certain goal, she said. Growth is ongoing. It's part of being alive. Derek was quiet for a long time, processing this perspective that was clearly foreign to his understanding of how life was supposed to work. I don't know if I can do this, he said finally. I don't know if I can be married to someone who's constantly changing, constantly pushing for more. And I don't know if I can stay married to someone who wants me to stop growing, Lisa replied. So I guess we both have some thinking to do. The conversation ended there, not with resolution but with recognition. They'd reached a place where the fundamental differences in their visions for marriage and life could no longer be ignored or smoothed over with compromise. Derek went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, while Lisa sat in the kitchen with her acceptance letter and tried to imagine what her life might look like 3 months from now. Would she be juggling coursework with household responsibilities while Derek sulked and criticized? Would she be living somewhere else, starting over as a single woman pursuing her education? Would they find some middle ground that honored both his need for stability and her need for growth? The uncertainty was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. For the first time in 7 years, Lisa couldn't predict what her life would look like in the near future. The script she'd been following for so long had been torn up, and she was writing new pages without knowing how the story would end. But as she sat there in the quiet house, surrounded by the evidence of the small, controlled life she'd built, Lisa realized she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was afraid of staying the same, of letting fear keep her trapped in a life that felt too small for the person she was discovering herself to be. In 3 weeks, she would sit in her first college class in over a decade. She would introduce herself to strangers, tackle assignments that challenged her intellect, and begin the slow process of discovering what she was truly capable of accomplishing. Derek could choose to support that journey or oppose it, but he could no longer prevent it. Lisa Rodriguez was going back to school, and everything else would have to adjust around that reality. For the first time in years, she fell asleep excited about tomorrow, and all the tomorrows that would follow. The future was uncertain, but it was finally, completely, hers to create. 6 months later, Lisa Rodriguez stood in front of the bathroom mirror applying lipstick she'd bought with money from her first paycheck as a substitute teacher. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the person who used to practice fake smiles in this same reflection. This woman's eyes held confidence, her shoulders carried purpose, and her smile was genuine because it belonged entirely to her. The morning routine had changed dramatically since September. Instead of tiptoeing around Derek's moods and preparing elaborate breakfasts to appease his anger, Lisa now woke early to review lesson plans and check emails from the elementary school where she'd been working 3 days a week. Her textbooks sat openly on the kitchen table, no longer hidden like contraband, surrounded by student papers she graded with the same care she'd once reserved for Derek's comfort. Derek appeared in the doorway behind her, already dressed for work but moving with the defeated shuffle that had become his signature since Lisa started school. The dynamic between them had shifted so fundamentally that they felt like strangers sharing living space rather than husband and wife sharing a life. "Another day playing teacher?" he asked, his voice carrying the familiar edge of resentment mixed with something newer and more dangerous, fear. Lisa capped her lipstick and turned to face him, no longer automatically flinching at his sarcasm. Another day actually being a teacher, she corrected calmly. Mrs. Chen is out with pneumonia, so I'll be covering her second-grade class all week. Derek's jaw tightened at her matter-of-fact tone. Lisa's transformation from apologetic wife to confident professional had been gradual but unmistakable, each small success building her into someone he no longer recognized or knew how to control. Right, he said. How much are they paying you? To babysit other people's kids while your own husband can barely afford to fix his truck? The guilt tactic that would have worked 6 months ago now bounced off Lisa like rain on glass. She'd learned to distinguish between genuine partnership, concerns, and manipulation disguised as financial responsibility. Enough to pay for my textbooks next semester and help with the household expenses, Lisa replied, gathering her teaching materials into the canvas bag Angela had given her as a congratulations gift. Plus I'm building experience that will help me get a full-time position when I finish my degree. Derek followed her to the kitchen, where the evidence of Lisa's new life covered every surface. Student worksheets waited to be graded, education journals lay open beside her coffee cup, and her laptop displayed the online classroom where she'd been maintaining a solid A average despite Derek's predictions of inevitable failure. This is insane, Derek said, gesturing at the organized chaos of learning materials. You've turned our home into some kind of office, and for what? So you can make $12 an hour bossing around kids who don't respect authority? Lisa poured coffee into her travel mug, a ritual that now marked the beginning of days filled with purpose rather than dread. So I can make a difference in children's lives while building a career that matters to me. So I can contribute financially to our household while developing skills that have value. So I can feel proud of how I spend my time. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and Derek reacted to it like a physical blow. For months, he'd watched his wife transform from someone who sought his approval for everything into someone who barely seemed to notice his disapproval. Proud, he repeated mockingly. You're proud of being a substitute teacher with a handful of community college credits. That's what passes for achievement in your world now? Lisa set down her coffee and looked at him directly, her gaze steady and unafraid. I'm proud of setting a goal and working toward it despite every obstacle you've put in my way. I'm proud of discovering I'm capable of learning new things and excelling at them. I'm proud of earning money through my own efforts and contributing to something meaningful. Derek's face flushed red. Obstacles? What obstacles have I put in your way? I let you take your little classes, didn't I? I put up with you turning our house upside down with your homework and your teaching supplies. How exactly have I been standing in your way? The question revealed how little Derek understood about the difference between grudging tolerance and genuine support. For months, he'd made snide comments about every assignment, questioned every time commitment, and predicted failure at every turn. He'd allowed her education the way someone might allow a pet to play outside, with reluctant permission and constant supervision. You've criticized every step I've taken, Lisa said calmly. You've questioned my intelligence, my motives, and my chances of success. You've made it clear that you see my education as a personal attack on our marriage rather than an opportunity for growth. Because it is a personal attack, Derek shot back. Everything about this screams that you think our life together isn't good enough for you. Everything about this says you'd rather be somewhere else, being someone else. Lisa felt a familiar sadness at Derek's inability to see beyond his own insecurities. His fear of losing her had made him incapable of celebrating her successes or recognizing how her growth could benefit both of them. I'm still the same person, Lisa said gently. I'm just a person who now knows what she's capable of achieving. No, you're not the same person, Derek said, his voice rising with frustration. The person I married was grateful for what she had. The person I married didn't need constant validation from strangers to feel good about herself. The person you married was afraid of her own shadow, Lisa replied. The person you married had been convinced she was worthless and should be grateful for any attention at all. Derek stared at her, caught off guard by her bluntness. That's not true, isn't it? Lisa picked up her bag and car keys, preparing to leave for another day of meaningful work. When's the last time you told me you were proud of something I accomplished? When's the last time you asked about my classes or my students with genuine interest rather than skepticism? Derek opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of months of accumulated resentment and missed opportunities for connection. I don't know how to be married to this version of you, Derek admitted finally, his voice smaller than usual. Lisa felt a pang of sadness for the man who'd rather see her diminish than watch her flourish. And I don't know how to go back to being the version of me that you were comfortable with. She kissed his cheek out of habit rather than affection. A gesture that felt more like goodbye than see you later. I'll be home around 4. I'm grading papers tonight, so dinner will be simple. Derek said nothing as she walked to the door, but Lisa could feel his eyes following her with the intensity of someone watching something precious slip away. The tragedy was that he'd never recognized how precious it was until it started to shine too brightly for him to dim. The drive to Riverside Elementary had become Lisa's favorite part of each day, 20 minutes of transition from the tension at home to the joy of her professional life. The desert landscape that had once felt like a prison now looked like possibility. Endless sky and distant mountains that reminded her how much room there was to grow. At school, Lisa transformed into someone Derek wouldn't recognize. She moved through the hallways with confidence, greeting colleagues who knew her as the substitute teacher with the education degree in progress rather than Derek Martinez's disappointing wife. Students ran to her with genuine excitement, proud to show her their work and eager to hear her praise their efforts. In Mrs. Chen's classroom, Lisa faced 23 second graders who saw her as a source of knowledge and encouragement rather than someone whose worth was constantly in question. She helped Tommy with his reading, celebrated Maria's math breakthrough, and mediated playground disputes with the patience and skill that came naturally to her. During lunch, she sat with other teachers who treated her as an equal, discussing curriculum ideas and sharing stories about their students' progress. These women talked about professional development opportunities, weekend plans that didn't revolve around managing someone else's moods, and dreams for their careers that no one questioned or diminished. "How are your classes going?" asked Sandra, a veteran teacher who'd become an informal mentor. "Still maintaining those straight A's?" Lisa smiled, no longer embarrassed by her academic success. "I just registered for next semester. Child development and classroom management. I should have my degree finished by next spring." "That's wonderful," Sandra said. "Have you thought about applying for the full-time position that's opening up in the fall? You'd be perfect for it." The suggestion sent a thrill through Lisa that had nothing to do with external validation and everything to do with recognition of her own capabilities. 6 months ago, the idea of applying for a full-time teaching position would have seemed impossibly ambitious. Now it felt like the natural next step in a journey she was finally brave enough to take. "I'll definitely consider it," Lisa said, and meant it. That afternoon, Lisa returned home to find Derek sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of beer. And an expression she'd never seen before. Not angry, not resentful, but something sadder and more final. "We need to talk," he said as she set down her bag. Lisa felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety, then consciously relaxed. Whatever Derek wanted to discuss, she no longer needed to approach it from a position of fear or defensiveness. "Okay," she said, sitting across from him at the table, where her textbooks usually spread their promise of growth and change. Derek took a long drink from his beer, gathering courage for words that seemed difficult to form. "I've been thinking about what you said this morning. About not knowing how to go back to being the person I was comfortable with." Lisa waited, sensing that Derek was working towards something important. "The thing is," Derek continued, "I don't think I want to learn how to be married to this new version of you. I don't think I can handle being with someone who's always growing and changing and wanting more." The words should have hurt, but instead Lisa felt something like relief. Derek was finally being honest about his limitations rather than trying to convince her that hers were the problem. "What are you saying?" Lisa asked, though she suspected she already knew. Derek met her eyes for the first time in weeks. "I'm saying maybe we want different things from marriage. Maybe we've grown into people who aren't compatible anymore." Lisa felt tears threaten, not from heartbreak but from the complexity of losing something that had never quite been what either of them needed. "Maybe we have. I keep waiting for you to fail," Derek admitted. "I keep hoping your classes will get too hard or your teaching job will disappoint you, and you'll come back to being the person who needed me to make all the decisions." The honesty was brutal and liberating at the same time. "And I keep hoping you'll be proud of my successes instead of threatened by them." Derek nodded slowly. "I don't think either of us is going to get what we're hoping for." They sat in silence for a moment, acknowledging the end of something that had been over long before either of them was brave enough to say so. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. Derek finished his beer and set the bottle down with careful precision. "I think we both deserve the chance to find someone who wants the same kind of life we want. You deserve someone who celebrates your ambitions instead of resenting them. I deserve someone who's satisfied with simple happiness instead of always reaching for more." Lisa realized that Derek's words didn't feel like rejection anymore. They felt like permission to become fully herself without apology or compromise. "I think you're right," she said quietly. Derek stood up, suddenly looking lighter than he had in months. "I'll stay at Tony's while we figure out the practical stuff. The house, the finances, all that." Lisa nodded, already mentally calculating what she'd need to afford this place on her substitute teacher salary, or whether she should find somewhere smaller that truly belonged to her. For what it's worth, Derek said as he gathered some clothes into a duffel bag, I'm glad you figured out who you wanted to be. I just wish it could have been someone who wanted to be with me. I'm sorry it couldn't work differently, Lisa said, and meant it. Derek paused at the door, looking back at the woman who'd somehow transformed from his apologetic wife into someone he no longer recognized. You're going to be fine, you know. You're going to be more than fine. After he left, Lisa sat in the sudden quiet of the house and felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood, complete ownership of her own space and time. No one would criticize her dinner choices, question her schedule, or make her feel guilty for pursuing her dreams. The silence felt like freedom. 3 months later, Lisa Rodriguez walked across the stage at Pine Valley Community College's graduation ceremony, accepting her associate's degree in elementary education with a perfect 4.0 GPA. In the audience, Angela cheered loudly while Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Sandra and several other colleagues from school had come to celebrate, bringing flowers and promises of recommendation letters for the full-time teaching position Lisa had decided to pursue. Derek wasn't there, but his absence felt appropriate, rather than painful. He'd moved in with Tony permanently and was reportedly dating someone who appreciated simple routines and didn't ask complicated questions about personal growth. Lisa genuinely hoped he'd found happiness with someone whose dreams aligned with his comfort zone. The divorce had been surprisingly amicable, perhaps because they'd both finally acknowledged that they wanted fundamentally different things from life. Derek kept the house, which had never felt like home to Lisa anyway. She'd found a small apartment near the school district where she hoped to work, a bright space with large windows that she'd filled with plants and books and evidence of the life she was building for herself. Standing there with her diploma in hand, Lisa thought about the woman who used to practice fake smiles in the bathroom mirror, who used to accept worthlessness as her natural state. That woman had been so convinced of her own limitations that she'd nearly missed the chance to discover what she was truly capable of achieving. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick. There had been nights when she doubted her intelligence, days when Derek's criticisms had echoed louder than her professor's encouragement, moments when giving up had seemed simpler than pushing forward. But each small success had built upon the last, creating momentum that became unstoppable once she'd learned to trust her own capabilities. Now, at 31, Lisa was beginning a career that mattered to her, living in a space that reflected her personality, and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than power imbalances. She'd learned that worthless was never a fact about her character but rather an opinion held by someone who benefited from her believing it. After the ceremony, Lisa stood outside the auditorium with her diploma and her flowers, surrounded by people who'd supported her journey and celebrated her achievements. Mrs. Patterson approached with tears still shining in her eyes. I told you those roses would bloom beautifully if someone just believed in them, the older woman said, pulling Lisa into a warm hug. Lisa laughed, remembering their conversation about plants that wanted to grow but needed someone to have faith in their potential. Thank you for being the someone who believed in me before I believed in myself. Angela bounced over with excitement that hadn't dimmed since the moment Lisa first told her about applying to college. So what's next? Are you ready to take over the education world? Lisa looked around at the group of people who'd gathered to celebrate her achievement, then at the desert landscape that had witnessed her transformation from victim to victor. The future stretched ahead of her like an open road, full of possibilities she was finally brave enough to explore. I'm ready for whatever comes next, Lisa said, and for the first time in her adult life, she absolutely meant it. The woman who'd once asked, "Is this all there is?" had discovered that there was infinitely more, and she'd learned she was worthy of claiming every bit of it. Derek had called her worthless trash for years, but Lisa Rodriguez had shown him exactly what worthless looked like when it transformed into priceless, exactly what trash looked like when it became treasure, exactly what happened when a woman finally decided she deserved better and had the courage to create it for herself. The best part was that this was only the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.